Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'm going to read a verse. I read this verse recently, and several people told me they felt it was very relevant. So it's the verse in purport itself. Maybe what I said was not so relevant, but the verse in purport was relevant. So I thought I would speak from the same verse. This was from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The verse oftentimes quoted, Srila Prabhupada quoted it a lot. And it's a good verse for those who are aspiring sadhakas. Sometimes those who are aspiring sadhakas have been aspiring for some time, and they start to feel as if their wheels are spinning, and doesn't seem that they're moving as rapidly as they hoped they would. That's okay. I'm not. And of course, patience is a topic which is oftentimes I quote in this connection, but it's not really what the verse is about. But patience gives us a little sense of, especially the way it's been described by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Patience is something that every sadhaka requires, because it doesn't always happen as quickly as according to our timeline. When we first came to Krishna consciousness, I know, speaking for myself, I was expecting the timeline to be very quick. That, and especially when one really captures a mood of surrender and service, it seems as though that one immediately gets this overwhelming sense of conviction, assurance. Yeah, this is the right thing. Krishna sometimes will do that for persons who take to the path of bhakti, having heard very convincing arguments from the mouths of devotees who themselves are strict practitioners, what to speak of for myself and many others, having read Prabhupada's books, which were so convincing, words so convincing, a kind of overwhelming sense of urgency kind of takes place that I have to surrender. I have to become Krishna conscious. It's nice. It's nice when that's there. It acts like a catalyst. We saw this recently also. Nihabhakrama nasashi pachavaya navijate. In the verse of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, in this endeavor, there's no loss and there's no diminution. And just a little advancement on this path will protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. And the endeavor that Krishna is speaking about is buddhi yoga, or bhakti yoga. The endeavor means with one's vyavisayatmaka buddhi ekeha kurunandana. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose. The aim is one. They're very resolute. And intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. So when vyavasayatmaka buddhi is there, resolute determination to engage in devotional service, then Krishna takes notice and sometimes gives us that little encouragement to help us to know that we've made the right step. For some people, it may last a long time. For some people, it may not last at all. There's no assurance of how long it will take. But it's enough to give us a little inspiration and impetus to that, yes, there's something more to come. Maybe I'm not qualified yet to get more, but there's something more to come because I've gotten enough of a glimpse of the satisfaction, tushti. That's one of the words here. Pushti, tushti. Tushti is satisfaction. Pushti is nourishment. And bhakti. Pushti, tushti, and bhakti. Bhakti is devotion. So it gives a little sense that there's some satisfaction and gives us the impetus that I want more. I'd like to experience more of where this is coming from. This is coming from a place outside myself. I couldn't in any way create this pleasure for myself. It must have coming from a source beyond myself, which is, of course, when Krishna is pleased, we become pleased. Bhajaniya paramasuka matrasa sukhatvam, which is explained, Prabhupada speaks about in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that to the degree that Krishna is pleased, we become pleased. So we have if we can do something to please Krishna, and when Krishna is really pleased, then we can just imagine, having experienced that little glimpse, we can just imagine what's in store when Krishna is fully pleased with his devotees. And that's why we hear about devotees from Srimad Bhagavatam. We hear how Krishna reciprocates with those who give him pleasure. He reciprocates by giving them a satisfaction which is incomparable, and then gives them the impetus. Even fully surrendered devotees who are experiencing the highest satisfaction of devotional service, Krishna gives the impetus to give more of themselves because it's so satisfying. It's a mystery. It's a mystery for those who haven't gotten a little taste. But if anyone's gotten a little taste of that surrender, then Narada Muni tells Vyasadeva, anyone who has once surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord, he can, even if he falls from his position, he can't become an ordinary fruitive worker again, because anyone who has once relished the taste of Krishna's lotus feet just won't be able to forget that ecstasy again and again. It won't. It's not possible to forget it. It's, of course, it can be possible to temporarily forget it if we become covered over. I tell this story. Maybe it's a little bit radical, but I'm going to tell it because P.R.I. Mohan might be aware of the personality that I'm speaking about. We once had in our temple in Boston, we had this person who would come to the temple back in the 70s. Come to the temple regularly, he would move in and be really enthusiastic and really surrendered and very blissful. And then he would leave with no warning, no indication, nothing of the sort. Just all of a sudden, we'd wake up in the morning, he'd be gone. And then, wasn't you, Mokhtavanya? Mokhtavanya did that once. But he came right back. Prabhupada's lotus feet. But Mokta knows I'm talking about, probably. And then he would come back again after some time. And as if nothing, didn't skip a beat. As if nothing happened, he would come in and do some service. And he would run very enthusiastically, motivated. And we think, wow, here's somebody who's really got some taste for service. And then he'd be gone. And it would repeat itself quite frequently. And we began to question what's going on in the life of this individual. And then there was a period of time when he stopped coming for quite some time. And then all of a sudden, I don't remember. Do you remember what year it was, Mukta? So it was in the 70s, wasn't it? Late 70s. The temple started getting these phone calls. And the phone calls person who would pick up the phone, and the person would, on the other end, he would start saying the most absurd things. I mean, really, it's critical. It's quite critical. Say things critical of Krishna, and devotees would listen to it. They just hang up. We didn't know who it was. And it would go on repeatedly again and again, and pick up the phone, and somebody's on the other end, and they start saying, and then after some time, it stopped, and it kind of stopped around the same time when this person came back to the temple again. And somehow the devotees, I don't know how it happened, they made a connection that the person was calling was this person. And they asked him, why is it? Was it you? And he confessed, yes, it was me. He said, because every time I go out of the temple, I can't enjoy. And I'm thinking the only way I'll be able to enjoy is if I blaspheme Krishna and he lets me go, because he won't let me go. So I've been calling and just blaspheming Krishna, thinking that maybe he'll let me go so I can enjoy, but I can't forget what it's like to serve in the temple. So, as I said, it's not the most shastric reference, but it's an indicator that once you get a taste of service to Krishna, Krishna doesn't let us go very easily, unless, of course, he understood the right conclusion. If you want to be let go, then you have to commit an offense, not to speak of Krishna, but to commit an offense to a devotee who's dear to him. So, if one who forsakes his material occupation to engage in Krishna's service, meditating on Krishna's pleasure, and simply trying to please him, then that surrender, that experience that is internally experienced, bhajaniya paramasukham matra susukatvam, to the degree that Krishna is pleased by our surrender, then we feel some satisfaction. So that's described here in this verse, as we said, tushti. It's a verse from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm not going to have time to read the whole thing, but we'll read it, and speak a little bit about it, because, as I said, the purpose for reading it is that for those who are sadhakas and those who are actually want to experience Krishna's pleasure. It's a catch-22, because if you want to experience Krishna's pleasure, the only way you can experience Krishna's pleasure if you don't think of your own. So sometimes people get caught into that dilemma, like, of course, Krishna may give a little taste, but sometimes we just get a glimpse, and then if we're not careful and either commit offenses or we're a little bit inattentive, we may lose that taste. But even losing that taste is Krishna's mercy. And sometimes Krishna will do that to his devotee. He'll take away that taste so that the devotee who once had that taste and couldn't forget it, he remembers what he has to do if he really wants to get it back again. There's nothing wrong to want some taste. It's not considered to be selfish, but the taste should be that from Krishna's pleasure, because that taste is unexplainably, it's not possible to comprehend. It's something that obviously we can't do for ourselves. It's only can be done when we feel some satisfaction in our hearts. So this verse, Bhakti Pareshano Bhava Viraktya Anyatra Chaisha Trika Eka Kala Prapadyamanasya Yatashnatashus Tushti Pushti Kshud Apayo Nugasam. Devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. The reason why I like this verse so much is because everyone can relate to the analogy being used. Everybody knows what it's like to be hungry. Everybody knows what it's like to take a feast when you're really hungry. And everybody knows what it's like when you get full and your hunger is no longer, it's an experience everybody has. And you'll find throughout the Bhagavatam, in fact, there's a book that was published. I'm the one who put together the book, and somebody else took it and published it. It's called Analogies. And Prabhupada uses so many analogies, but in the scriptures, there's so many analogies. And Prabhupada gives an analogy to help us understand why analogies are needed and why they're helpful. He even uses an analogy. And he says, just like if you want to see the moon moving in the sky at night, if you stare at the moon, it's very difficult to see how it's moving. Just stare at it. It looks to be almost in the same place, and sometimes you may have to sit there for quite some time and just to get a sense that maybe its position in the sky is a little bit different. But if you don't want to wait so long, then Prabhupada says, if you look at the movement of the moon through the branches of a tree, because the branches are closer, then you can see how the moon is moving from one branch to the next. It's a lot easier to see the movement of the moon when you have something close to you to see it. So in the same way, he says, by having analogies that are more within our realm of experience, then something which may not be easily grasped can be at least understood by using these analogies within the realm of our experience. And everybody knows what it's like to eat, to have the hunger go away, to feel some nourishment, and to know that it tastes good. And the reason why the analogy is so good is because if you're eating and it tastes good, you don't have to ask somebody else, does it taste good? You know. Sometimes people say, how do I know I'm making an advancement? Well, you know. How? And this verse says, because devotion is increasing. Just like, how do I know I'm eating food? How do I know it tastes good? You know, it tastes good. As we spoke of before, tushti, satisfaction. There's some satisfaction there. The symptom of when that satisfaction is there, then Vishaya vinivartate niraharasya dehinas, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that the embodied soul may restrict himself from sense enjoyment, even though the taste still remains. But when he ceases those engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he becomes fixed in consciousness. So higher taste, we have a cookbook called The Higher Taste, distributed profusely. But it's actually based on that verse from the Bhagavad Gita. When you get a higher taste, then you can restrict yourself from the lower taste, or as the analogy goes, that we can know that our hunger is going away. You know it. Our hunger is going. When I'm eating, I know as I'm eating, my hunger is going away. So in the same way as we're experiencing taste, we experience that our contemplation of the objects of the senses, our indulgence in the gratification of the senses, our attachment to particular objects of attachment that are obstacles to our advancement in Krishna consciousness, they decrease. They decrease. So I'll read the purport. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this analogy as follows. Bhakti or devotion may be compared to tushti, satisfaction, because they both take the form of pleasure. I've already explained that. In other words, if bhakti increases, bhakti pareshanubhava viraktiya, or as we said before, to the degree that Krishna is pleased, our pleasure increases. Pareshanubhava, experience of the Supreme Lord, and pushti, nourishment are analogous because both sustains one's life. Here's something that might be, someone might say, I have no experience of the Supreme Lord. That's why I'm struggling. I don't experience Krishna's intervention in my life. I don't see his hand. I don't see how he's protecting me. I don't see how he knows me, cares about me. Sometimes many people think that I feel like an abandoned orphan. I pray every day, and yet I've never heard Krishna say something as affirmation to my prayers. Devotees, they lament. Of course, such lamentation is not bad, because it also can be an impetus to surrender more, if one has firm faith. Just like we oftentimes give that example from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who gives the example that a bhakta, he wants some fruit of his efforts. Just as a kami, he wants some fruit. He wants to enjoy sense enjoyment. A jnani, he wants some fruit. He wants to get liberation. And the bhakta wants some fruit. And someone may say, well, I thought bhaktas don't want any fruit. They don't. But the fruit the bhakta wants is Krishna's pleasure. And sometimes getting an indication of Krishna's pleasure is not so easy. Therefore, the fruit the devotee is trying to get is that if Krishna is pleased by my activities, and I've heard this philosophy again and again and again, I've tried to apply these teachings repeatedly throughout my life. Sometimes I feel as I'm slipping and falling, but I have firm faith that if I go on serving, that someday, somehow or other, Krishna will be pleased by my activities. And if Krishna is pleased, then as long as he lets me know he's pleased, that's it. That's all I need. As long as he lets me know. That's direct experience of the Lord. In other words, when we get a little indicator of something unexplainable, something that I didn't deliberately accomplish by my own efforts, somehow it manifested itself in my life that can only be explained as Krishna. Everybody's got their Krishna moments. Usually they have their Krishna moments. Couldn't be anything else but Krishna. Like I thought like that when I met Prabhupada, because I had read so many books, and I had read the Bhagavad Gita. I read first canto of the Bhagavatam, read Krishna book. I never met Prabhupada before, and I was already second initiated before the first time I saw him. And when I saw him and I fell on the ground, I was thinking, Krishna, this can only be divine arrangement to somehow come face to face with Krishna's pure devotee. This is Krishna's intervention in my life. Sometimes devotees ask that question, how do I know I've met, who is my spiritual master? And I tell them, well, you know who your spiritual master is when Krishna manifests himself to you through his words. Then you know this person is my spiritual master. When I hear this person, Krishna is somehow manifesting himself to me. I can't explain it any other way. And because the inspiration to surrender, the inspiration to serve somehow is coming. So here, the analogy is given that experience of the Supreme Lord and pushti, nourishment, are analogous because both sustain one's life, right? Just like if you're eating, you don't eat just once, you have to get nourishment. Usually comes from regulated eating. It's a serial event, something that you have to do on a regular basis. And each time you eat, when you're hungry and you're weak, then it's you're feeling some nourishment. Same thing with Krishna's presence. We aspire for it to become a serial event, something that takes place on a more regulated basis. But sometimes Krishna, he knows because he's in the heart. And he says that he's in the heart and he understands exactly what is necessary for everyone to come to him. He knows when it's time to reveal, to reciprocate. Tesham avanokam pratamaham agyanajam tama. As Krishna says, out of compassion for them, I, who are dwelling within their hearts, I destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. He knows when to reveal himself. He knows when our desire is genuine. He knows when we're trying to please him. We can't fake it. We can't say, make a show of it. He knows, because as Prabhupada explains in the Bhagavad Gita, just as a person knows the fragrance of a flower by being close to the flower, in the same way the Supreme Lord knows the desires within the heart because he's in the heart of every living being. So not only does he know when we're stepping to him, but he also knows when we're holding something back because he knows everything. Knows past, present, and future, Krishna says, but me, no, but it's very difficult for them to know me. But he knows. So he knows when to reciprocate. He knows when to reveal himself more to the devotee. He knows when the devotee is actually ready to step closer to him. And Prabhupada would always say, you take one step to Krishna, Krishna takes, 100 steps? I don't know. I've heard 100, that so many steps. Krishna responds to the degree that we take that step towards him. And taking that step towards him means he knows the commitment we've made internally. Just like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's described when a devotee takes his vows of initiation, Krishna accepts that person to be as good as himself, right? Because he's taken a serious step. I'm surrendering to Krishna. I'm making a commitment to Krishna. It's a serious step in one's life. Krishna accepts such person to be as good as himself. So, of course, as it's described here, both sustained one's life, repeated nourishment as well as surrender, the impetus to surrender more. And if we don't, then we're the only ones to suffer. We're the only ones that experience that I know again and again, Krishna's trying to tell me what I need to do. But again and again, I just say, no, I can't do it yet. It's like Bhagavatam states. I often quote this verse. I'm not going to be able to complete this, but at least I hope it's relevant. Shinvatas vakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridantasto hyavadani vidanoti suhit satam. The Krishna, who's the super soul in the heart of all living beings, he cleanses desire for material enjoyment within the heart of that person who develops the urge to hear about him when the message is properly heard and chanted. So Krishna, he takes away the obstacles, he takes away the attachments from the person who develops the urge to hear about him. And we oftentimes give the example that sometimes devotees are afraid when they're very much attached. Bhogaishvaya prasaktanam taya pahitachetasam, Krishna says, in the minds of those who are too much attached to sense gratification and material opulence and who are bewildered by those things, there can be no resolute determination for devotion. It just can't take place because there's still too much meditating on enjoyment of this world, meditating on their attachments. So if we hear in the Bhagavatam that Krishna will take away these attachments from within the heart of the person who develops the urge to go on hearing about him, then sometimes we become afraid that if I go on hearing about Krishna, and he's going to take it away from within the heart, he may take away some attachment when I'm not looking. So I have to guard it. I have to protect it. How do I protect it? By meditating on it. And by meditating on it, we lose the ability to hear. glories of Krishna because I'm too much meditating on those things of what I'm too comfortable with, too attached to, and Krishna knows. So therefore, Bhagavatam says, develop the urge to hear his message. The urge means there's a very distinct, determined desire that despite the obstacles, despite the difficulties, despite the attachments, despite the upheavals of my life, there's one thing I won't give up. And that's hearing about Krishna, because it's the only solution. In fact, the Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, states that in the Krishna's teachings to Uddhava, he says that I'm sorry, it's 11, 20, 28. Somehow I can't remember the verse. Because anybody help me with the Sanskrit? And then it'll help me to remember the English. That having awakened faith, yes, having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with sense gratification, knowing that sense gratification leads to suffering. This much has to be there. Disgusted with sense gratification, and I know it leads to suffering, but I still can't give it up. Now that's sound familiar. Of course, maybe we're not disgusted with it yet, and that, of course, could be another obstacle. But Krishna's telling Uddhava, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur says this verse of the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam is where bhakti begins. Bhakti begins from this point, that a person has awakened faith and hearing about Krishna. Having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, knowing that sense gratification will lead to suffering. We may not be convinced of that. It may take a few serial experiences of sense gratification leading to suffering. It may not have happened right now, or may have happened some previous time, but if we know it leads to suffering, and being disgusted with it, then but still not being able to give it up. And Krishna says, it's okay, my devotee can simply go on with faith and conviction that even though he knows sense gratification leads to suffering and he can't give it up, he will sincerely repent for having committed and having engaged in it. I'm going to read. It's in this same section of the Bhagavatam. I wanted to read a very, very nice prayer that was composed in connection to this verse. It's 11th canto, 20th chapter, verse 27, 28. And in the commentary, this is commentary. The word nirvana indicates that a sincere devotee, although somewhat entangled in the remnants of sense gratification, is completely disgusted with material life and under no circumstances willingly commits sinful activity. Sometimes he may not be able to, he may fall into it, not planned. He may fall into it. In fact, he avoids every kind of materialistic activity. And then the word kaman basically refers to sex attraction and its byproducts in the form of children, home, and so forth. Within the material world, the sex impulse is so strong that even a sincere candidate in loving service of the Lord may sometimes be disturbed by sex attraction or by lingering sentiments for wife and children. A pure devotee certainly feels spiritual affection for all living entities. I'm sorry, I'm looking for the prayer. Oh yes, here it is, it's coming up. Including the so-called wife and children, but he knows that material bodily attraction leads to no good, for it simply entangles one and one's so-called relatives in a miserable chain reaction of fruitive activities. The word dridha nishchaya, steadfast conviction, indicates that in any circumstance, a devotee is completely determined to go on with his prescribed duties for Krishna. Thus he thinks, By my previous shameful life, my heart is polluted with many illusory attachments. Personally, I have no power to stop them. Only Lord Krishna within my heart can remove such inauspicious contamination. But whether the Lord removes such attachments immediately or lets me go on being afflicted by them, I will never give up my devotional service to him. Even if the Lord places millions of obstacles in my path, and even if because of my offenses I go to hell, I will never for a moment stop serving Krishna. I'm not interested in mental speculation, fruitive activities. Even if Lord Brahma personally comes before me offering such engagements, I will not even be slightly interested. Although I am attached to material things, I can see very clearly that they lead to no good because they simply give me trouble and disturb my devotional service to the Lord. Therefore, I sincerely repent my foolish attachments to so many material things, and I am patiently waiting Lord Krishna's mercy. This prayer is actually an elaboration on what I was speaking about before, that the devotee, the bhakta, the sadhaka, he wants Krishna's pleasure. But sometimes it doesn't come so quickly and he has to be patient. Right? It doesn't come so easily, Krishna's pleasure. And but yet that's the real fruit he's looking for by his devotion. Somehow or other, would Krishna be pleased? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, therefore he requires to be patient. And he defines patient as that a devotee will go on serving Krishna. That he's convinced that Krishna will be pleased by my activities either now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, or 100 lifetimes from now. But I'll go on serving him with conviction. I'll never give up service to him. He said this kind of patience is required to execute bhakti. And he says sometimes it seems that impatient persons, because they have this expectation of their own timeline for Krishna to be pleased, they think it has to fall within my own timeline. If it doesn't fall into my own timeline, then I think there's something wrong with Krishna. But no, we don't make that timeline. Krishna knows exactly what's needed. He's in the heart. Therefore, patience means I will go on serving him patiently. Therefore, I sincerely repent my foolish attachments to so many material things, and I'm patiently awaiting Lord Krishna's mercy. If anybody is inclined to want to read this prayer, because it's really, profound, because it really gives us the essence of what we really, how we need to be thinking if we can't give up some attachments that we know we should be, but we want to be able to, and we want to trust that Krishna knows when and how to do it. This prayer, actually, it's the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 20th chapter, verse 27 and 28. If you don't have 11th canto, then you should buy a set of Prabhupada's books. This verse in itself is worth the whole set. But there's so many of them, so many verses which are relevant. I've outdone. I haven't finished Bhakti Parishanu Bhava Varaktiya, but I did tell that I would end at an appropriate time so that we can go on with the usual program. I hope I said a few things maybe that are relevant to those who are sadhakas, who are aspiring for bhakti, and if even one of you finds it relevant, then I'll consider this talk a success. Maybe, I don't know if I can call it a success, but we thank Srila Prabhupada, we thank Srila Jiva Goswami for his commentaries, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also, from whom these commentaries came from. Hare Krishna. I'm going to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much. Here's one thing I wanted to say. It's just a nice pastime. Sometimes when devotees hear 100 birds, I have to read that one. I'm having a tough time with this one. And you're telling me 100 more. That can't be so patient. But Shastra tells us that for those who have such firm conviction in the Lord's words, because we just heard the Lord's words, then he can reduce 100 births to a few moments, as he did with the equivalent. Past time. Lord Chaitanya was fulfilling the desires of the Lord particulars and many Krishna's Mukunda was standing by the side. He asked for Chaitanya. Everybody else was giving the as a bowling, and Shiva says, what about Mukunda? When we called him, Lord Chaitanya said, oh, Mukunda? He used to go and used to hear from these impersonalists, and he would become just like them by hearing from these impersonalists. And then when he comes in our association, he becomes just like a bhakti. It was because it's explained that before, he used to go and they hear from the impersonalists, and of course it's simply pastime. But nonetheless, Lord Chaitanya said, that Mukunda, no, he will not be able to see me. He'll see me again in 10,000 births. But in 10 million? Maybe 10 million births. Maybe it was 10 million, but it was 10,000. I don't want to make it sound too drastic. And when Mukunda heard the statements of Lord Chaitanya, he didn't hear, that's probably why, because he didn't hear 10 million births. All he heard was, he will see. That's all he needed to hear, because he was thinking, I'll never see him again. When will he call me? He hasn't called me. And what she said, he will see. So he was so ecstatic with the words, he will see. He started raising his hands and dancing. I will see, I will see, I will see. And Lord Chaitanya said to Srivas, go get Mukunda. And Srivas was trying to get Mukunda, but he was just so absorbed. I will see, I will see. He had to pick him up and carry him and bring him before the Lord. And of course, there's wonderful prayers that were offered before the Lord. But, so 10 million births can be reduced to a few moments. We actually have firm faith in Krishna's words. I thought I should add that in case any of you were discouraged by the duration time that may be required. That we need to be patient. There's a way to counteract it. Firm faith in the words of the Lord. And this verse I just read is Krishna's words. It's him speaking to Uddhava with his instructions. May the love and canto the Shiva Bhagavan. Okay. Hare Krishna.